It's Star Legacy Media.
Something was shifting behind the scenes at Joyce Meyer Ministries, a shift no one in the public was prepared for. After more than 20 years on the network, Joyce's sudden disappearance from Dayar TV in 2025 sent shockwaves through her audience. The official explanation? Quiet, controlled. But leaked internal memos, the kind that were never meant to see daylight, hinted at something far more complicated. Whispers of serious allegations, ones that went well beyond financial disputes. The ministry rushed to find new platforms, scrambling to slow a sharp drop in viewership. Insiders began to wonder whether the empire she built, worth an estimated $100 million, was now entering its most fragile chapter. So what really happened behind the closed doors of Dayar? To understand that story, you have to go back to the beginning, long before the cameras, the crowds, the fame. Joyce Meyer was born Pauline Joyce Hutcherson on June 4, 1943, in South St. Louis. The world was at war, and so was her home. Her father, a machinist drafted into the Army the day she was born, left immediately, disappearing into the storm of World War II for 3 long years. When he finally returned in June 1946, he wasn't the same man. The war had carved shadows into him, silence, anger, and a heaviness that seeped into every room of their small home. Money was scarce, emotions tighter still. To the neighbors, their working-class block looked steady. Inside, tension reigned. As Joyce grew older, the damage inside her father began to spill outward. His drinking hardened into control, and according to Joyce's later accounts, that control crossed into abuse. She was around 5 when the rules began to shift into something darker. Punishments became harsher, isolation grew. She watched other children play freely outside, while she learned to navigate a home where even small mistakes brought consequences that loomed far too large. By her own testimony, the sexual abuse began when she was just 3. A secret woven through the walls of the house. One her mother, fighting battles of her own, felt powerless to confront. That silence became its own kind of wound. Joyce learned early that help wasn't coming. As her mother faded under the weight of her own suffering, Joyce moved through childhood unanchored, carrying her emotions alone, her fears alone, the burden of what happened in that house alone. Pieces of her slipped away, one moment of silence at a time. But somewhere in that loneliness, she began reaching for light. It arrived unexpectedly when she was 9. In 1952, in a modest school in South St. Louis, she opened a Bible for the first time on her own. The words felt different, gentle, steady, like a door to a kinder world. She kept reading, and something in her shifted. She would later describe the moment as becoming born again. For a brief moment, she hoped faith would transform her home life. It didn't. The very night she returned from church, the darkness continued. The contradiction, a religious facade on the outside and a hidden nightmare on the inside, made her feel even more alone. According to Joyce, the abuse continued weekly for nearly a decade. By her teens, an even darker element appeared. Her father, she said, used pornography as another tool of control, twisting her understanding of herself, deepening her shame, pushing her further from the world around her. Schoolwork slipped, friends drifted away. She withdrew, convinced of the lies he told her, that she was worthless, guilty, flawed. Her mother's silence cut deepest of all. Later, Joyce said her mother admitted she couldn't face the shame that would follow the truth. The apology came years too late, unable to erase the lonely nights of her childhood. nights that shaped her in ways she would wrestle with for decades. At 18, in 1961, Joyce finally ran. No money, no safety net, just distance between her and the house she had survived. She worked as a secretary in an insurance office, trying to stitch a life together from the pieces she carried with her. Her first marriage came quickly, a desperate reach for someone who might treat her differently. Instead, she found herself with the man she later described as a con artist. He lied, cheated, stole. Once he even left her stranded in California, with nothing but a dime and a crate of soda bottles. The marriage collapsed after 5 long years. Back home again, she entered another marriage, hoping for stability, only to find new emotional storms. The past clung to her, mixed with the exhaustion of early adulthood, motherhood, and financial struggle. By 1965, at just 22, she gave birth to her daughter Laura. She worked as a bank teller, lived in a tiny apartment, and barely made enough to get by. Depression crept in quietly. Trauma and responsibility pressed against her every day. Counseling helped, but only at the edges. Beneath it all, the anger, fear, and guilt remained, shaping the woman she would eventually become. Yet even in the middle of all that darkness, Joyce began reaching toward faith again. Not in dramatic leaps, but in slow, hesitant steps. Steps that over the years became the early scaffolding of the ministry she would one day build. In 1976, at 33 years old, something happened that she would describe for the rest of her life as a turning point. It was early morning. She was driving to work, worn down, frustrated, praying in the way she had prayed 1,000 times before. Tired, routine, almost mechanical. And then, something shifted. Joyce later said she heard her name called. Once, twice, 3 times. Clear, personal. A presence filling the car so strongly it shook her. It startled her and electrified her. For years, she'd felt spiritually hollow, empty, despite the faith she had carried since childhood. But that day felt different, like something reaching directly into the quietest corners of her life. She drove home that night feeling, in her words, drunk in the spirit. The sensation didn't fade. It settled inside her, reshaping the way she prayed, the way she read scripture, the way she saw herself. It pushed her from private belief into a hunger for direction. Soon after, she began small, a lunch break Bible study with a handful of coworkers. She asked her pastor where to begin, and he pointed her toward a Thompson Chain Reference Bible. She opened to John 1:1, and she taught from there. 25 people came at first, then 30, and they came back every Tuesday, through rain, snow, whatever the weather brought. They liked how plainly she spoke. She talked about real problems, at home, at work, in the mind. She talked about her own struggles honestly, even when she was still learning through them. The group grew so quickly, she started another study on Thursdays at a friend's home. That second group lasted 5 years. By the early 1980s, Joyce and her husband joined Life Christian Center in Fenton, Missouri, a small, struggling church with maybe 30 people. Joyce started a women's Bible study at home, expecting a small turnout. Instead, 115 women came on the first night. Soon, it grew to nearly 500 every week. Pastor Rick Shelton noticed the momentum, her energy, the way people resonated with her story of surviving abuse. He invited her to speak on Sundays. In 1980, he ordained her as an associate pastor, something rare for women at the time. She counseled those carrying wounds like her own. She helped lead a 15-minute radio segment with Shelton about emotional healing through scripture. That tiny show was planting the seeds of something far bigger. In 1983, at age 40, she launched her own radio program, Life in the Word. It started on a single station in St. Louis, but the audience spread quickly, soon reaching 6 stations across the Midwest, including Chicago and Kansas City. Listeners were struck by her voice, not polished, but raw. She spoke openly about the abuse she said she endured as a girl. She spoke about fear, shame, trauma, and the long, unsteady road back to breathing again. The show was only 15 minutes, but it hit hard. By 1984, her ratings had climbed nearly 50%. For many listeners, especially women carrying their own unspoken pain, those 15 minutes felt like someone finally understood. People wrote to her by the hundreds. Some said it was the first time they felt seen. She talked about the childhood abuse she described in her testimony. Abuse she later said happened more than 200 times between ages 10 and 18. Not to shock, but to show that healing was possible. By the mid-1980s, the mail never stopped coming. Letters asking for counseling tapes, prayer, or simply reassurance that survival was possible. Her honesty cracked open conversations Christians had avoided for generations. By 1985, the work had grown too big to manage while serving as an associate pastor. She resigned and formally created Life in the Word as an independent nonprofit ministry. It started out of her home. Funding came entirely from listeners, around $50,000 a year in the beginning. It grew fast. She hired staff. Her husband Dave became business manager. Long days were spent answering letters, fulfilling tape requests, and responding to people searching for hope. In August 1985, the ministry was legally organized. By May 1986, it had tax-exempt status. Small beginnings, but deeply personal ones. During these early years, she released her now famous Battlefield of the Mind radio series. Everything changed after that. She talked about the battles most people kept hidden: depression, anxiety, haunting memories, the thoughts that came at night. In 1986 alone, more than 10,000 cassette tapes sold. People said they slept easier, breathed deeper, finally felt understood. It became one of her best-selling books. But back then, it was simply her voice reaching into dark corners people thought no one could see. Her rise wasn't quiet. By the mid-1980s, local religious leaders began criticizing her teachings on prosperity. Some said she made faith sound like a path to wealth. St. Louis newspapers ran pieces questioning her message, worried it could mislead struggling families. The criticism grew with her audience. Some labeled her teachings as name it and claim it. The debates followed her for decades. Still, she pushed forward, convinced her message helped people break fear's grip. In 1993, at age 50, she stepped into television. Enjoying Everyday Life launched on WGN and BET, just a 30-minute local show at first. Within 2 years, it reached 1 million viewers a month. Her unfiltered, emotional style made people stop and listen. Her reenactments of trauma drew both praise and controversy. Some stations even pulled the show temporarily, saying it was too heavy for children. She didn't back down. She believed honesty, even raw honesty, brought healing. Her ministry kept growing. By 1997, they moved into a $20 million headquarters in Fenton, Missouri, funded over time by more than $100 million in donations. The new campus had a full production studio, allowing her team to create more than 300 episodes a year. It became the heart of the ministry, sending her message across continents. And she kept telling her story, openly, unguarded. She spoke about her marriages, her failures, the infidelity in her second marriage, and the long climb out of emotional wreckage. She turned every mistake, every scar, into fuel, a way to make someone else feel less ashamed of their own wounds. Not everyone agreed with her approach, but the raw honesty drew in people who recognized their own pain in her story. In 2000, Joyce and her husband Dave opened the St. Louis Dream Center, a 100-acre refuge for people carrying trauma, addiction, and poverty on their backs. It offered addiction recovery, after-school support, food programs, and housing for men rebuilding their lives. More than 5,000 people received help every year. But with that rising impact came rising scrutiny. People wanted to know, were the funds used responsibly? With a ministry of that size, every dollar had to be accounted for. In 2009, after a Senate investigation into megachurch finances, Joyce's ministry joined the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. The ECFA required stricter audits and full transparency. Reports showed that over 90% of the ministry's funds were going to outreach and charitable work, an answer to critics who had questioned earlier spending. Those earlier controversies were unforgettable. One included a $23,000 marble commode, a detail that became a symbol for her critics. But ECFA reviews documented steps towards stronger oversight, adjusted salaries, clearer royalty structures, and stricter accountability. In 2012, nearly 20,000 women gathered in St. Louis for the Women Arise conference. Joyce shared about enduring abuse in her first marriage and how Dave helped her heal from years of emotional wreckage. Panels featured survivors and professional counselors, breaking years of silence around topics many churches avoided. It was one of the first events of its size to confront abuse so directly. Her ministry expanded beyond conferences and sermons. In 2015, she partnered with International Justice Mission to fight human trafficking. Together, they rescued more than 1,000 victims, funding raids, legal services, and safe houses. Joyce often said her past shaped her commitment to protect others. By 2020, her YouTube channel passed 1 million subscribers. There, she shared stories she had never told publicly, including the moment in her 20s when depression pushed her close to suicide before a friend intervened. Her openness about mental health made her one of the few major Christian leaders willing to confront those struggles without shame. Between 2015 and 2020, her ministry quietly funded 100 adoptions for children recovering from abuse. They covered legal fees, counseling, and support for adoptive families. There were no press releases, just quiet help for those who needed it. But controversy always followed close behind. In 2003, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch published a 4-part expose. Joyce earned $900,000 a year. Dave earned $450,000. The ministry had funded a $2 million home for them, plus 4 additional homes worth another $2 million for their children. Inside the $20 million headquarters, furniture costs totaled $5.7 million. And there it was again, the $23,000 marble commode, the detail that lit up every headline. Critics demanded answers. The backlash was immediate. In 2007, Senator Chuck Grassley launched an investigation into 6 televangelists, the Grassley Six: private jets, foreign accounts, luxury spending. Joyce Meyer Ministries spent roughly $100 million a year, making them a major focus. Her ministry was one of only 2 that fully complied. The investigation found no illegal activity, but demanded stronger oversight. The ministry responded: new board members, more audits, and published financial reports. Another controversy emerged when audits revealed $500,000 spent on cosmetic surgery for staff in 2005. Critics said the justification, improving public image for ministry work, didn't sit right. Combined with earlier reports, pressure mounted. By 2010, Joyce's salary had dropped to $250,000, but royalties from her books earned her about $30 million. Some accused her of self-enrichment. Others argued her writing was separate from ministry funds. Donor drops followed. A few outreach programs were temporarily cut. But reforms continued. By 2009, a new board, mostly unrelated members, published annual reports and improved accountability ratings. The ministry kept its tax-exempt status. No legal action followed. Then came the Daystar scandal. In 2024, journalist Julie Roys reported allegations against Daystar president Joni Lamb, accusing her of ignoring her granddaughter's sexual abuse in 2020-2021. Internal documents and family statements claimed warnings had been dismissed. Joyce had aired her show on Daystar for nearly 20 years. In January 2025, she paused broadcasts, saying she could not stay connected to a network facing such severe allegations. Her own past made the issue deeply personal. Many saw her departure as a stand for victims. After leaving Daystar, she shifted her program to TBN, Lifetime, and YouTube, reaching more than 500,000 viewers a day. She lost about 10% of her Daystar audience, but gained younger followers online. YouTube offered live Q&As, devotionals, and open conversations that TV never allowed. By late 2025, her presence on TBN and Lifetime was solid, and her online community continued to grow. But Daystar was unraveling. Joni's son Jonathan Lamb accused her of financial misconduct, including using a ministry credit card to fund a $100,000 honeymoon in 2023. He claimed she earned more than $1 million a year and kept payroll sealed. Daystar denied the accusations, citing independent reviews. But court documents revealed that Marcus Lamb had directed her salary to match both their combined pay after his death. The tensions ended with Jonathan's firing, and the network's issues became painfully public. Joyce, remembering her own past controversies, publicly supported stronger child protection laws within ministries. On November 14, 2025, her daily devotional titled "Discipline Brings Reward" struck a chord. She spoke about integrity, about surviving seasons of unfairness with faith. She never mentioned Daystar, yet the message echoed the moment. More than 400,000 people downloaded that devotional in a single week. It resonated with those watching her navigate yet another storm, one more chapter in a life marked by both controversy and unrelenting transparency. Once again, her ability to weave personal struggle into spiritual truth kept her audience close.